And good morning. Welcome back one more time to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma, and I do appreciate you being with me. We are continuing our study. We're actually bringing it down to a close. Our study of the Olivet Discourse. We have been focused for a good long while now on Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following. The reason we're spending so much time on this particular set of verses is that virtually everyone, when you look at the commentators, everybody says, oh, here we have the gathering of the nations, they come before Christ, who comes in power and great glory. He comes in his kingdom. Then he sits on the throne of his kingdom. This is the end of time. It's got to be the end of time. I used to believe that. I used to teach that. I even debated that. But there are a lot of things about it that I began to notice as I began to dig into, especially the prophetic background of Matthew 25, 31 and following. And I began to see how this language is used and how the New Testament writers apply this language. And it dawned on me that I was truly ignorant. Genuinely. Now, I was sincere. I can guarantee you. I wasn't purposely ignorant, but I was sincere and I was ignorant. Thank God for God's grace, right? Okay. When I began to study and to realize the prophetic background and source for so much of the New Testament, to realize that all New Testament eschatology is drawn from, based on, and is the anticipation of the fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel. And let me illustrate. See, in the fellowship of my youth, one of the most foundational, fundamental doctrines is God was through the Old Testament at the cross. God supposedly nailed the Old Testament to the cross, which is a false doctrine. Secondly, God was through with Old Covenant Israel at the cross. I was having the second of three formal debates with a guy by the name of Bill Lockwood. And I was doing my research, and one day, like the proverbial freight train, it ran over me. Where Paul said, I preach nothing but what Moses, the law, and the prophets said should occur. I believe all things that are written in Moses, the law, and the prophets, that there's about to be the judgment of the living, or the resurrection of the living and the dead. And I'm going, wait a minute, Preston. How can you teach? How can you teach? This is self talking to Preston. How can you teach that God was through with Israel at the cross? How can you teach that God was through with the law of Moses at the cross if, years and years after the cross, Paul's saying my eschatology is based upon God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel? I consulted with a couple of my best known friends at the time, and I said, okay, guys, in this debate, if I ask my opponent, Bill Lockwood, if I ask him, is your eschatological hope based upon, taken from, and was the expectation of the fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Israel, how will he respond? And they're both going, well, duh. He's going to say absolutely not. So I submitted a list of written questions to Bill Lockwood prior to our debate, walked over to his table before the start of the debate that night, and our agreement was that we could do that. One of the questions was that what I just stated. Well, he didn't get the questions back to me when he was supposed to. Immediately before the beginning, I just walked over to the table and I said, Bill, you're supposed to give me the answer to my questions. Okay, yeah, here they are. So he gave them to me. I went directly to this question. Are your eschatological hopes, or is your eschatological hope based upon, taken from, And is it the expectation of the fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises made to Old Covenant Israel? And out in the margin, he had put in great big bold letters, underlined 3 times, quotation marks, 3 exclamation marks, no. So, when it was my turn to speak, I got up and I said, I asked Bill the following question. And I read his answer. And I challenged Bill. I said, Bill, you're teaching a different gospel. You just told me your eschatological hope is not the hope of Israel found in the Old Testament. Paul said he didn't preach anything but the hope of Israel found in the Old Testament. So I said, Brother Bill, you need to stand up and explain to this audience how it is that you don't preach a different gospel. Not one word of response. That was our second debate, excuse me. In our third debate, I kept pressing him on the same question. Well, guess what? He had the final speech of that debate. And after refusing to answer my points, my arguments, my questions any further, I mean, not a word, literally. In the very last speech of the debate, he gets up and he said, now, as to Preston's question, it may be, it may be that in the churches of Christ, we haven't gotten it exactly right in regard to the Old Testament eschatology. But that doesn't mean Preston is right. Pounded on the pulpit and all this kind of stuff. Now, he didn't explain how he could be right on his eschatology and wrong on this fundamental, foundational, crucial issue. He just said, Preston is a heretic. So, folks, this is really, really an important issue. Paul, as we demonstrated yesterday, was anticipating the fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 66. The prediction of the coming of the Lord in flaming fire to take vengeance on the persecutors of his faithful saints. So here's Paul anticipating the fulfillment of Isaiah 66. Isaiah 66, the coming of the Lord in flaming fire in judgment of the persecutors of the saints. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, the coming of the Lord in flaming fire in judgment of the persecutors of God's people. Perfect. Okay? And so, what we're finding, as I pointed out yesterday, there are some in the amillennial world, some in the postmillennial world, who are now admitting that 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 was fulfilled in AD 70. They seem not to realize that if 2 Thessalonians chapter 1 is AD 70, that means Isaiah 66 was fulfilled in AD 70, which it has AD 70 stamped all over it. I don't have time today to go into the full extent of it, but I've been sharing some of the thoughts from Isaiah 66, which proves that. They seem not to realize, okay, 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, Isaiah 66. Isaiah 66 is Matthew chapter 25, 31 and following. But wait a minute. Isaiah 66 is the day of the Lord to bring in the new heaven and the new earth, which is the coming of the Lord of Matthew 25, 31 and following. Oh, but wait a minute. Remember, Paul has already applied Isaiah 66 to AD 70. I want you to notice with me, I hope you have your Bible. Okay. In Isaiah 66, 19, after predicting in verse 15 and following the coming of the Lord in flaming fire and vengeance on the persecutors of his people. He says, "For I know their works and their thoughts, and it shall be that I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory." Now, wait a minute. What? I'll gather all nations and tongues. That's Matthew 25, 31, and following. Oh, but wait. Isaiah 66 is the time of the judgment on Jerusalem for persecuting the saints. Remember Joel chapter 3. After speaking of the last days in chapter 2, 28 and following, chapter 3, in those days, i.e. the last days, and at that time, the great day of the Lord, I will gather all nations to judgment. So here we have Isaiah 66, at the day of the Lord in flaming fire, to gather all the nations. But it would be the day of the Lord, once again, in the judgment of Jerusalem, in the judgment of the temple, in which the Lord said, what did the Lord say? The Lord said, I will bring upon them that which they dread. This is the judgment of Israel, ladies and gentlemen. It's not the judgment of the globe. It's the judgment of Israel, the judgment of the temple, the judgment of the city. But I have to hurry. I'm almost out of time here. So I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. I will set a sign among them. And now watch this. And those among them who escape, I will send to the nations, to Tarshish, Pul, and Lud. Now I'm going to stop right there and drop down to verse 22. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, says the Lord, so shall your descendants and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, all flesh shall come to worship before me. Folks, you see what he's predicting here? The coming of the Lord for the new heaven and new earth. That's 2 Peter chapter 3. The day of the Lord, in which the earth and the elements shall be, quote, burned up. It's coming of the Lord in flaming fire. This is 2 Thessalonians chapter 1. The coming of the Lord in flaming fire. You see, these parallels and the connection of these dots cannot be ignored. And what we will see tomorrow, all right, is that in this new heaven and new earth that would result from the coming of the Lord in flaming fire, there would be evangelism. I want to urge you to read Isaiah chapter 66, 19 through 22. You'll see what I'm saying. It's easy. And that is devastating to the Reformed amillennial view and to the postmillennial view of eschatology. Now, I promise you I was going to offer a really, really good special, all right, for the rest of the month of October 2022. U.S. orders only. Order a copy of my book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings, in which I discuss in great detail a whole bunch of the stuff that we've been going over in this series on the Olivet Discourse and the coming of the Lord, okay? Then, my book, Can God Tell Time? Which answers the objections, which answers the claim, oh, God doesn't tell time like we do. Yes, he does. And then my book, In Flaming Fire, an exegesis of 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, which includes a discussion of Isaiah 66. Now, if you were to purchase all three of these separately, okay, it would cost you, almost $11 just in postage for these two, not to mention the price of the book. If you go to my website, there will be a banner right up at the very top. My wonderful webmaster, Alan Morton, will see to that. For the month of October, U.S. orders only. Order the book, We Shall Meet Him in the Air, The Wedding of the King of Kings. You will get included, free of charge, Can God Tell Time? And, here we are, In Flaming Fire. and I'll even pay postage. Okay? So you get 2 free books and total postage. Folks, that's $14 worth of postage I'm paying for you. Okay? Not to mention these 2 books right here. So go to my website, click on the banner, make the order. You will be glad that you did. Well, once again, thanks for joining me. We have more to say on the connection between Matthew 25:31, 2 Thessalonians 1, Isaiah 66 on the flip side.